One. Um, Hello, Andrew. Would you like to state your name, major, year, and hometown?
My name is Andrew Willett. I am a freshman. My major is telecommunications sports production, and I am from Monrovia, Indiana.
All right. So, why did you decide to take this class?
So, my freshman, uh, I guess my scheduling appointment was pretty rushed. I knew I would have to be taking an honors 199 course, and there were like three options available to me, and one was like about pets, and I forget, the other one was like ancient history, and then this one was the last 200 years. And with everything that had been going on in our society, from the George Floyd protests, the police brutality, and everything else, a race relations class really sparked my interest.
All right. So, growing up, what was your hometown or neighborhood like in terms of race?
Growing up, my neighborhood, uh, definitely my neighborhood and my hometown were both majority white. We might have had one to two black students at my school. My neighborhood was all white, so um, didn't really talk about race much unless it was on the news or it was a racist joke that was being told by some students at my school.
So, did you ever think of race growing up, or when was your first time ever really thinking about it?
So I can't really remember my first time thinking about race, but it was probably from some sort of media, either the news or um, a movie. But it didn't really come up a whole lot growing up. I know we probably used terms like ghetto, or I guess a term like that. Um, Growing up, we talked about, because we have a homestead in my hometown, which is basically like a big housing subdivision. Um, and it would be referred to as the ghetto of Monrovia, because there was crime there and not a whole lot of wealthy people lived there. So that was like an inadvertent racial term that we used, but no, it didn't really come up other than, like I said, uh, racist jokes being told in my school. So I didn't really think about it too much.
So, you are a white man. As someone who's considered to have all of the privilege that America can offer, how do you feel about that, and how do you think you can
I
go
think,
about with it?
sorry, what was the last part there?
How do you think you can go about with it? Like, will you use your privilege for good?
So yeah, that's an interesting topic. I completely agree that by being white, by being a man, I have more privilege than, say, a black woman or a black man, or even a white woman. Um, I guess knowing about using that privilege, I I think that's probably a good way of putting it, is I need to use it for good um, rather than just ignoring that I have it. So I do admit that I have that white male privilege. Um, Going about using it, I'm not really sure how I would do that.
Okay, so where would you and your hometown fit within the system?
Um, Me and my hometown, um, well, I think we are one of those white, more conservative places for sure. We are very small and rural, so we have a primarily white, and we definitely have racist people in my community. So I say we would fit in one of the um, I guess one of the more racist communities in America, and bringing about change. Um, for me, it would be much harder than to say if I were living in a more diverse place. So I think I fit in a role where I can try to have an impact on those around me in my community, but I also um, realize that not a whole lot of change in people's minds can be done. So more change in policy or in our lawmakers, people who make those big decisions that have racial effects and cause racial inequities. That's where I can have more of an effect and hopefully can start to educate my community um, to try and have that effect.
So I know you said that the events of 2020 like helped inspire your decision in taking this class. Have they also reshaped your perception of racism and anti-racism?
So, like you mentioned in our interview, I think um, more than anything, 2020 has been a reminder. And I think with all of the new mediums, with social media and our cell phones, we are constantly able to be reminded. And I think 2020 really was a driving force in kind of our generation, me able to see that change needed to be made, that we have serious problems with race in America. And so I think probably for myself in 2020, the George Floyd protests, the police brutality that I was able to see, that had always been going on. And like the Black Lives Matter movement back in 2016, that was like another reminder. But I think 2020 really woke me up and made me understand that it's a constant. Um, and so I think I really got to see. I always thought racism was a problem, but it hadn't been at the one of the priorities on my mind. So um, I think 2020 has made racism. I know that it is still a problem. It is a very big problem that needs solving. And I think I think I learned about the term anti-racism from 2020.
So I know you mentioned during my interview that you went to the Black Lives Matter protest at Ball State at the beginning of the semester. Have you been to any other like anti-racist events this year?
So that was the only anti-racist event, was that protest at Ball State that was organized by students and backed by the president and the Muncie police. That was the only one I was able to attend. Other ones, like you said, there was a protest in my hometown that was actually met by an opposite protest against the protest. But I didn't hear about it until the day of, and I was in college, so it was an hour and a half away. So, um, no, I really didn't hear about other ones in particular, but I did hear about that one and I attended it.
Hmm. So, how would you describe the race relations at Ball State?
That's interesting. I think at Ball State that we have probably a, it's definitely a majority white, but there's for sure more diversity in the Ball State community than I had growing up. There are more people of color, Black people for sure. And I think at the Honors College too, that there's more diversity. And so that has been a perk of being in the Honors College. But race relations at Ball State, I think we are still in a little bit in the try to ignore race, at least up top at our campus, um, where we just try to almost be colorblind, and that kind of ignores some of the problems that we still have. And there are definitely still problems, like you mentioned, the professor calling the cops on a student of color, a Black student in class. So but we definitely still have problems, and um, I think we're doing a good job though of addressing some of those problems. There obviously is more work that needs to be done, but there are good people in place, and obviously the fact that this class happened was a really important step. And so I think work needs to be done at Ball State, but we've got some good people in place, and hopefully are making a plan of action towards kind of resolving some of our issues.
So, what steps do you think Ball State could take further in order to create a culture of belonging and a safe space for students of color?
Absolutely. So I think some of the bigger things, like when we had our the incidents on campus after the election, where uh, Trump trains, to put it lightly, caravan, whatever that was called, trucks with Trump flags on the back of them, running through campus on several days and reportedly shouting stuff at students and in some cases endangering students of color and just going around campus. I think that Ball State needs to do a better, definitely needed to do a better job of addressing those issues and concerns that students had, because obviously it was just an issue of public safety. So I think we need to really try less to be so politically correct and just in that scenario stand more um, for the safety of students and really just be on the right side of history in a sense. So probably um, creating more positions for uh, having classes like the one we are having now to educate all of our students, and just pushing more anti-racist um, ideas, and again addressing those racial issues that we have on campus and racist incidents. We could do a better job and just creating a more open community to Black people and people of color.
So, you say this class has been really important. What have you learned personally from it, or how has it changed your perspective?
This class, so like I said, the protest over the summer before I ever got to a college campus really woke me up a little bit. But this class, I think you stated it very well. It laid a foundation of racial knowledge that was very important to me. Like the rundown of the history of race from European to when it went to America, and how our systems have put down people of color for centuries. And Also, getting to learn about the history of white privilege a little bit, and white privilege still today helped me personally. So that changed my perspective a little bit. I think I was just able to gain more knowledge from my baseline of knowing that there was a problem with race, but I was actually able to identify some of those things and really gain that baseline foundation of knowledge.
So, what was the biggest or most surprising thing that you have learned from this class?
I'd say probably I've been going back and forth with this in my head, but really the realization that race is a social construct really affected me. That and how that social construct really made whites as the norm and normalized being white. I had never really noticed that, but now, like, going around, I can read a book and see how the author doesn't describe the race of a white person but will describe the race of a black person. I'm able to see, like, in our society, how we um, can normalize being white and therefore um, put down black people and people of color by making them different and making them racialized, and obviously already living in this racist society.
So, what do you think it means to be anti racist?
So when we read our book by Kendi called How to Be an Anti-Racist, I think that definition of anti-racist really clears it up the most for me. And that was, I, I, I don't know it word for word, but it was someone who stands against racism and promotes anti-racist ideas and anti-racist policies, not just by being not racist, but by actively working against racist policy.
So, where do you see Ball State and the United States 5 to 10 years from now?
I think there is a good group of people at Ball State. Um, so I see good change being made. And so at Ball State, I think in 5 to 10 years, hopefully this class will be available to many more students, and hopefully we will be on a good path forward to making a more comfortable campus, a more accepting campus for people of all colors and all races. I'd say probably the United States. A pessimistic version of myself thinks that things either won't change or that racism will just come back in a different way to poorly affect Black people, especially poor Black people. But if I'm being optimistic, I think that we took a step forward at the end of this year, and hopefully we can get the just being full forward here, that we can win the Senate and change can be made uh, instantly to enforce anti-racist policy and try to remove some of our racist policy, and hopefully also remedy some of the racist policy that has negatively affected people of color.
So, moving forward, how do you think you will use what you learned in this class in the future?
So this class, like we mentioned, created a phenomenal foundation. I expect myself to spread that foundation of racial knowledge with other people around me, regardless of their political ideology or regardless of if they are racist openly or not. So I expect myself to play a key part in spreading the knowledge that I've gained, and also just reading more books to try and gain more knowledge about race and about racism.
Okay. Well, is there anything else you'd like to say?
I think probably the last thing was that um, we need to uh, promote anti-racist policy, and for any racist policy in the last or ever, we need to remedy the effects it has had on people of color and Black people, and um, really just poor people in general, in order to kind of create a more just society.
Okay, well, thank you for your time, Andrew. This has been a great interview.
Thanks, Autumn.